Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Subscribing to My Podcast. Because I have a new guest featured every week, it makes it very difficult to maintain consistent viewership. So if there's one thing that you can do to support me or the guest featured on the show, it's by interacting with my channel in every way that you can. You can always decide to unsubscribe later if you decide that you hate me or my show. With that plugging aside, enjoy my discussion with Andrew Crapuchettes is the CEO and founder of company Red Balloon. It's a conservative job board that currently exists to pertain and partake in a lot of the Christian values that maybe used to be in the job force and then should maybe continue to be in the job force. But Andrew has a lot of thoughts and a lot of, personal integrity when it comes to his values and the ways that he thinks, and he's trying to put that into the workforce, which I think is a valiant and really cool effort. But he's also been involved in a lot of other companies, a lot of them involving other job boards in the workforce, and I'm sure that he will allude us to a lot of the history in that because it's very interesting as well, and it speaks to a lot of the origin of maybe his current business ventures right now. But Andrew, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and then tell some of the viewers some important things that they should know about you.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew Crapuchettes, as mentioned earlier, grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, did the .com thing when I actually never went to college because I started working when I was 16 as soon as I got a driver's license, because it turns out if you can code in the Bay Area in the late 90s and you're a 16-year-old, you can make way more money than all your friends who are going off to college. So that's what I did. Worked for .com, really amazing experience, wonderful people that I got to work with, and really got to jump around. I think I did 7 different jobs in 7 years at the same company, and that included I was a trainer, so I went around the country and taught people how to do computer automated design, taught graduate classes. Actually, as a funny thing, as a teenager, I was teaching graduate classes at a college just because I understood how 3D modeling worked and kind of the coding behind it. And, you think about 3D modeling, it doesn't sound that complicated, but when you get into like sheet metal design, when you're looking at tolerances for plastic injection molding, there's a lot of math involved, and math was always really easy for me. And so just talking people through that stuff, anyway, it was super fun. So did that, turned 21 on an expense account. I remember my 21st birthday, I was in Tokyo with a bunch of customers, and they're like, "You want some wine?" I'm like, "I guess so. I don't know." They're like, "Well, your company's paying for dinner." So I'm like, "I'll pick the wine," and pick like a $400 bottle of wine because, like, I don't know. I guess this is good. So really kind of a funny experience. Did karaoke bars in Tokyo as a young man. But really was working, call it 80 hours a week. It was my entire life. I didn't really have a social life, didn't have friends. So at the ripe old age of 22, I was like, this is for the birds. I would like to have a girlfriend someday. And right now I have zero social life. So I just told my boss, hey, I'm going to move out of California. I'm actually going to move up to Idaho. I'm sick of traffic. I'm sick of liberals. And California has a lot of both. So then they said, well, please don't leave. Why don't you move to Idaho or do whatever you want, but keep working for us remotely. So I was an early adopter of remote work and leaving the state of California. Moved up to Idaho, worked for them for a year. And at that point, we had gotten like $32 million of VC money, which was an interesting experience, kind of watching what VC money does to a business. It really changed our mindset. It changed the way that we interacted with each other, with our customers. It's almost like steroids for the body, right? It's like it pumps you up so fast that you cease to be yourself. And that's what happened to business. And so we did that. We lost all $32 million. I wasn't on the executive team, so these weren't my decisions, but I got to watch, kind of a front row seat. And then lo and behold, when you run out of money, you just fire everybody. So we went from 250 to 18 employees one day, and I was not one of those 18. And I was up in Idaho, which was funny. They gave me a severance. They gave me like a 4-month severance, which was kind of funny. Like, hey, you're running out of money, but great. I mean, I'm grateful. Yeah. I'll take it. But then I'm in Idaho, and I'm like, hey, I'm just going to go get a new job because I'm a Bay Area hotshot, and anybody in their right mind is going to want to hire me. And it turns out, in Little Moscow, Idaho, where the University of Idaho is, there's kind of like at that time, there were 3 major employers. There was the University of Idaho, there was Walmart, and there was the hospital. And it's like, oh, there aren't actually a lot of great jobs here, no matter what my skill set is. When the settlers moved west, there was a lot of work to do, not a lot of jobs. I'm like, well, okay, I bet there's work to be done. And I'm going to go create jobs, because if I want a job, I bet other people want them. A lot of university students love their time in Moscow, and then they'd love to stay around, but they need to support a family, so they got to go. And so I thought, great, I will create jobs. I've been given skills and abilities through my time in the Bay Area. I should create businesses and create jobs. So started a variety of different businesses. I had a 3D printing business very early in the 3D printing world. That we ended up selling off to Stryker Engineering, big company out of California. I started a student information software business, an SIS, and we ended up selling that to the employees. So I did a management buyout. I thought, you people need to build your own wealth for your own families. So I'm going to sell this to you on a kind of seller note structure. And then I built a labor market data company with a couple of economists, and we built that to about a $50 million SaaS business here in town, had a 70,000 square foot headquarters, had hundreds of employees, and really that vision of how do we create prosperity in our town, we were starting to realize that. In fact, the first business goal for that business was 50 employees earning over $50,000 a year. So 50 at 50, because we thought if we can have 50 employees earning over $50,000 a year, it's going to move the needle on this town. And I had this ulterior motive. And is this good or bad? I don't know, but I deeply love to eat. And if you can, you probably tell that from a distance, that man likes to eat. That boy can put down a burrito. But I understood that if I create great jobs for people, then they will have excess income. And with that excess income, they will go on vacations and they will go out to eat. And then we will have better restaurants, because we will have an economy that can support better restaurants. And ta-da, it worked. We have great restaurants in Moscow. So really that was my whole motive for building businesses and selling businesses, was just my appetite. So anyway, I do 6 successful exits over the years. Have a great time. In the meantime, meet my wonderful wife, 5 kids, live on 60 acres, 10 minutes from downtown, living the good life. 2020 comes around, and as the CEO of a company growing 25% a year with a 40% margin, generating just an enormous amount of cash flow for our board. And I'd sold the business a number of times, so I didn't have very much ownership left at this point. The board said, hey, you need to dial down who you are. I had been in a position where I was trying to bring my whole self to work. I was an unapologetic conservative Christian in the way that I ran my business. It was not a prerequisite or a weird thing for anybody coming into the business. I had a lot of people who worked for me who had completely different worldviews. I had customers who had completely different worldviews, and it didn't bother anybody, because it used to be in America, in the workplace, you could argue about things. You could argue about politics without people needing to yell at each other. And if you really got, hot and bothered, then you go grab a beer after work and continue to talk about politics or religion or whatever. And then the next day you're at work again and you're working together to build a common goal, and it's not letting you bother, right? We kind of lost that in 2020. And so my board said, hey, you need to say things online that are against your belief system, whether it was, backing various social causes or speaking against people that I agreed on. And I'm like, yeah, look, I'm not going to do that stuff. So anyway, long story boring. I was fired from my own business. Bummer. So that's about 2021, early 2021. I was going to take a year off. I'm doing a housing development. I got a bunch of commercial real estate. I like to play golf. I've got all these kids. I'm just going to, live the good life, kind of figure out what I want to do next when I want to grow up. And a friend challenges me and says, hey, look, you just had to make a decision between your job and your values. And it was very explicit. The board said, if you can and just be a CEO during the week and then a Christian on the weekends, you are welcome to keep your job. And I said, that's part of who I am. And for you to say, rip that part out for 5 days a week, simply is not going to work for me. And I don't ask other people to do that. If they have other religions, other worldviews, I don't say, hey, you have to completely park that on the weekend. But my board asked me to do that. So fast forward, this friend's challenging me and saying, look, you've put yourself in a position where you can shrug off losing your job, but not everybody can afford to do that. And so when they're kind of given this choice, job or values, that's a very powerful lever, especially for someone who wants to support their kids, pay their mortgage. They don't want to lose their job. They want to be a hardworking person. And so they're probably going to walk away from their values. And so let's make a place where if they stick with their values and lose their job, they can find a new one where they won't have to make that choice in the future. And that's the genesis of Red Balloon. We are the nation's leading pro-freedom job board and recruitment agency. We have hiring software, and we are having a lot of fun. Every day at Red Balloon is a Friday because we have so much fun here at Red Balloon. So there you go. There's the quick version. That's my story. I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, I think that's it's really cool to see you track and you can kind of make assumptions about where you're at the beginning. So it's really cool that, I mean, you had successful businesses, you know what it takes to lead a business and to start a business, to be in a business, and then you can see that it's not necessary. You can see the external factors that happened in 2020 that would cause the chain reaction to create the space that you created for yourself now. I'm really interested in what Red Balloon stands for and like the company. When you're talking about,
Yeah.
you know, what exactly is special about Red Balloon that maybe varies from other companies that are doing the same thing as you? And then how do you do these values? Like, how do you integrate the values into the current company?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I wish that Red Balloon didn't need to exist. And I know that sounds funny because this is my business and I've thrown my heart and soul and my hard-earned money into this, but I wish it didn't need to exist. But the reality is when you were looking at 2020, people saw people being canceled, right? Canceled from their job. You saw the famous Parler example. Parler's adding 500,000 new users a week, and then Amazon, Apple, and Google all worked together to shut it down in a day, kick it off the App Store. The whole situation was like, holy moly! But there was a lot of, I'll call it micro canceling that was happening all over the place. So Indeed.com is the biggest job board on the planet. I think they have 600 million unique visitors a month. All over the world, and they are enormous, big companies, spend $1 billion a year on marketing. They're a significant organization. Well, they decided in 2021 that if you as a business didn't have a vaccine mandate, or if you described yourself as freedom loving, or if you described yourself as God fearing, that you were no longer allowed to post jobs there. So if you needed to hire employees, you weren't allowed to participate in that employment marketplace. And obviously they're a private business. They can do whatever they want. But what they did is they opened up the market to an alternative, to a parallel economy. And so that's really where Red Balloon kind of came in. And we from the beginning have said, look, you don't have to agree with us on my religious stance, where I stand. I'm an unapologetic conservative Christian. You don't have to be. But what we do need to agree on is that what made America great in the first place, which is respecting each other's opinions, working hard, and valuing someone based on the value that they bring to the business, not based on who their parents are or what they do in their bedroom, is a better way forward. And so it's a merit-based hiring system. Meritocracy is kind of at the heart of what Red Balloon's been trying to accomplish. And so that's really where our stance ended. Now, part of the reason we got on the map pretty significantly is around the vaccine mandates. And my stance at that time is like, okay, so if I'm a pro-freedom person, if I want to treat employees like adults and allow them to make their own decisions, that has a huge impact on this vaccine mandate. And so I said, look, if a business is on Red Balloon, you're not allowed to have a vaccine mandate, because if your employees want to get a vaccine for COVID or whatever, knock yourself out. You're an adult. You should make the right decision for yourself. But you should probably have a conversation with your doctor, not your HR department, about what you put in your body. And that was an extremely controversial opinion in 2021. Now, for all you young entrepreneurs out there, taking a controversial position is not always a bad thing. Because as a consequence, I was on Fox News literally every other week talking about freedom in the workplace. I was on Glenn Beck. I was on all these very large platforms. And with not Indeed's $1 billion a year marketing budget, I all of a sudden was adding thousands of business and millions of job seekers. Literally millions of job seekers have been on Red Balloon looking for a place they can be free. And here's what's kind of interesting about what's kind of played out through all of that is I have now received thousands of thank you notes from perfect strangers who have found a job through Red Balloon. And these are, I had a single mom write me a couple weeks ago and say, look, I just wanted to let you know, I found a new job through Red Balloon. It's my dream job. Absolutely love it. But 3 weeks into the new job, one of my two sons, and she's a single mom, says to me, Mommy, you're not angry anymore. She's like, oh man, I was angry. But she's like, I realized that the job that I had was really impacting every other area of my life. And of course, that's true, right? Your job is a defining feature of who you are. And if you want to live your values out loud, and that's not allowed in the workplace, that's going to impact every other area of your life. And so all these thank you notes saying you've changed the trajectory of my family, you saved my marriage, that's really gratifying, and that's a kind of fun upside of the business. So for Red Balloon, we care about freedom, we care about merit. We believe that everybody should be respected for their opinion as long as they work hard and aren't a whiner. That's it. Piece of cake.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. I think probably the chief concern that I want you to speak on a little bit is sometimes it feels like to battle people excluding certain groups, Red Balloon in turn excludes certain groups. So can you kind of speak to how, I guess, like aligning with values, especially with the vaccine, by prohibiting companies from, allowing to have a vaccine mandate? It seems kind of like you're
Yeah.
doing the same thing, but on the other end. And then I imagine that if there were like hyper liberal companies coming to Red Balloon, I guess how would they be treated on your app? How would you interact with these people? Like, can you speak to kind of maybe the perceived ironic nature of the company?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're right. And it's funny because when you're hiring someone, when you're interviewing someone, you're discriminating. The whole point is discrimination. You're saying, I want to hire this person and not that person. It's what you're discriminating on, right? And so that's really the heart of what we're trying to do. Our focus is on merit-based economy and freedom in the workplace, right? And think of any product, right? I happen to play hockey. And so while a hockey store would sell a hockey stick to anyone who came in the shop, they're probably going to market to people who play hockey. And they're not going to market to people who don't play hockey, right? And so what we told employers is everyone is welcome. But what we want to do is we want to give an experience to our job seekers that they know with blessed assurance that they're moving to an employer that is not going to curb stomp their freedom. And that's it. And so when you have a two-sided marketplace, you're making a promise on both sides of that. And our job seekers are coming to us saying, hey, we want to work for someone who will allow me to bust tail for 10 hours a day, who will allow me to focus on the skills that I can develop, the value I can bring to the business, and not some of these external factors. So, absolutely. Is every business welcome? Yes, but they would need to change their behavior. And the good news is many of those businesses who had a vaccine mandate or had heavy-handed DEI policies wouldn't touch Red Balloon with a 10-foot pole. So that makes it a lot easier. I didn't have to. I think there was probably 3 businesses over the 5,000 that we had to give them a call and say, I don't know that you're a fit for our service. One of them, we didn't even call it, was a porn site, and they weren't trying to hire anybody. They were just trying to sell porn. Yep, clearly not a fit for our business. So
Right.
clearly you can reject someone because I discriminated against that porn site because they didn't want to buy job postings. They wanted to advertise their service to our job seekers, and I didn't want any part of that, right? And then the other 2 businesses, I just had a conversation with them. I said, look, your website, you sell flowers. One of them was a flower shop in California. And I said, when someone comes to your website, the first thing they see is a big black square and a bunch of political views about you. That is going to turn off our job seekers. So if you want to buy job postings, you need to just be aware that you are projecting what your worldview is through your website. You're welcome to post jobs, but you just need to understand it's probably not a good fit for you. And what was interesting is this particular flower shop said, oh, I didn't even think about that. I just thought, well, I have an opinion on something. I'll just kind of put it out there. But they're like, actually, I just want people who show up and work. And your website has those type of people. So I'd rather remove my black square and just focus on flowers. I'm like, great. That is probably going to be a better fit for you anyway. And then there was one other company that was trying to get in because they wanted to honestly scam job seekers, but that was another issue altogether. So yes, every business discriminates. Our business did. And if there had not been an Indeed or a ZipRecruiter or Monster or Career Builder or Dice or any of the other job boards out there, and I basically said, look, you're not allowed to work on any platform to some business that I disagreed with, well, that would be a different issue. But they have plenty of their own, world where they can interact, and we're just not a good fit for them.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things too is that every business theoretically is going to want somebody who's going to work really hard. They're going to want somebody who's a hard worker.
Right.
That even no matter if they align with their political views, they're going to want somebody who is politically okay to work with. Like even if they don't agree, you want somebody
Yes.
who's able to kind of like be normal, you know, and chat with them in that way. I guess, can you talk to me about your target audience that requires, I guess, this political nature to it or this conservative nature to it that other companies wouldn't necessarily want? Like, what's the distinction between maybe your target audience and then like LinkedIn's target audience?
Yeah. They're probably not that different because, we have a lot of businesses that are not religious in any way. They've all signed a pledge, and the pledge is very simple. It's that you believe the Constitution of the United States is a good document, and you're going to respect the freedom of your current and future employees. And if you can sign on to that, you're welcome. And you'd be surprised how many businesses are like, I'm just not comfortable signing on to that. Well, you're benefiting from the capitalism and the structure and the freedom that the Constitution allows. Why are you not okay saying that that's a good document? And they just felt like that was political. And I don't see that as political. We're Americans. The Constitution is a ruling document of the land. And so if that is a limiter to you, then okay, we're probably not a good fit for you. Now I'm trying to remember, what was the rest of your question?
Yeah, it was just in terms of like employees who are shopping for jobs or maybe like LinkedIn as a target audience, you know what I mean? Like, what are the distinguishing qualities between your audience and their audience?
Yeah. I mean, for our job seekers, they have to sign a pledge as well that they're going to show up and not be a whiner. And I mean, like, that's all we want. And that's all any business wants, is someone who shows up, works hard, and is not a whiner. I actually think diversity in the workplace is a good thing. And unfortunately, that word has been co-opted because I think diversity of ideas, diversity of backgrounds. I was just talking to a guy who's a vice president at a Fortune 500 company, and he got a compliment because, the president said, hey, you have statistically the most diverse team in our company. And he says, you know why? It's because I hire based on merit, and it turns out merit's found everywhere. But when you discriminate and say, I am going to hire someone not based on merit, I'm not going to hire someone based on their hard work or their effort, I'm going to hire someone based on their skin color, I'm going to hire someone based on their sexuality, then you're actually discriminating against everybody because you're saying that I don't value you because you're a hard worker. I value you because your parents happen to be a certain skin color. Right? Well, that's actually insulting to everybody as a side note. Our target audience for our job seekers, anyone who wants to work hard and wants to be valued based on the what they can bring to the business, that's our target audience. And it is funny because I was talking to a large marketing company in New York, and he's like, look, we agree on free speech, we agree on meritocracy, and we probably disagree on everything else. But the type of people that are on Red Balloon, who happen to be, on average, hardworking conservatives, are the type of people that are making me a lot of money right now. And I'm getting a lot of folks who generally, and I don't know why, I have some ideas, but I don't know why there's a correlation between conservatives and just showing up and working hard and people who have more of a liberal mindset, who tend to be a little bit more snowflakey, who tend to get offended more easily, who tend to require everyone to walk on eggshells around them. Well, that's not good for our business. That's not good for innovation. So I guess that's our target audience, is anyone who actually thinks that work is a good thing and they don't get offended easily.
Yeah. And honestly, like I said, to me, it's hard to attack some of these points because it seems like common sense, as in any employer, regardless of how you feel, is going to want hardworking employees.
Yes.
Now, the big distinction, and this is going to get maybe into a couple broader challenges, is that it seems as if, at least right now, that it is profitable for companies to be making these decisions that seem maybe against common sense. So these ideas of hiring based on diversity, it seems to be making money, and it seems to be an effective, I guess, business venture. Can you kind of speak to this as to why, like, maybe it is effective, but it might be immoral. It might not be effective for long.
Yeah.
Or I guess, like, where are these companies finding success doing kind of the opposite of what you're talking about?
Yeah, and I would argue it's not necessarily successful. In 2023, $8 billion was spent on DEI consultants in America. $8 billion. That's just on the consultants. That's not internal people who are focused on DEI training. And it's interesting because I talked to someone who was at Silicon Valley Bank before they went out of business, and he's like, we were lectured weekly by the CEO, by the head of HR, that that we needed to watch out for microaggressions, that we needed to focus more on skin color than on merit, that if you are white, you are absolutely a racist no matter what you've done, because white people in the past have done bad things. Therefore, you are a bad person and you need to apologize that you even exist, right? And so they're told this all the time in company meetings, right? Well, talking to this guy, he's like, look, we knew about the credit risk at Silicon Valley Bank. We knew that this bank was on thin ice and likely was going to fail soon. But we also knew that if we went to the credit department and said, hey, we're in real trouble here, it would be seen as a microaggression. And therefore, they knew that that would cost them their job. And they're like, so we just rode the Titanic into the ground. That's it, right? And so I think the lesson here is that when you, as a business, focus on something other than merit, you might be able to get kudos in the media for a short amount of time. You might be able to, win awards as an executive or an HR person because you're doing these things, but you're not going to win at business long term. You're going to be hurt by this. And I've talked to a lot of executives at Boeing who have just kind of been heads down on the DEI thing, but they're like, it's killing our business. It really is taking it apart right now. No matter what the reports say, no matter what the DEI consultants who are being paid huge amounts of money to push an agenda, it is killing our business right now. The other thing you need to remember in business, particularly when you get to bigger businesses, is there's only so much authority and responsibility to go around. And I'm going to tie this back just a second. So, authority and responsibility, right? And so, if you're a salesperson, you are given responsibility for your quota. And hopefully, you're given enough authority to determine how to use your day to try and hit that quota, right? So, if you said, hey, sales rep, you need to hit $1 million quota, but you have no real authority to make decisions on how you're going to use your day. And I need you to clean the bathroom. I need you to sweep the floors. I need you to write all your emails. I need to do all these things, but you still have to hit your quota. Well, now you've said you have a bunch of responsibility without the authority with which to execute on that responsibility. Does that make sense? So the issue is HR departments across America have a great deal of authority with very little responsibility to go along with it. So if that sales manager says, I need to hit quota this year, which means I need to hire 2 more sales reps, and the HR department says, well, I am only going to hire black lesbians. And if I can't find those people, we're not hiring anyone. Well, lo and behold, if you just look at demographics, there aren't as many of those people out there as there are competent sales reps. Just statistically, that's the way it is. And so they struggle to find those people. They don't hire those people. They get to the end of the year. Who do you think is going to get beat up that they missed their sales quota for the year? Well, the sales manager, not the HR department, because the sales manager had a lot of responsibility without enough authority to be able to execute on that. And so anytime you have a business where authority and responsibility are out of whack, somebody has too much and somebody has too little of one of those, and it's going to cause tension. And so you could have an HR department who is a recent college grad who basically says, I'm going to push my worldview without any consequences because I have all this authority and I don't have any responsibility for the outcome of those decisions. And that's what I think has happened quite a bit. And I lay that at the feet of CEOs who have abdicated their position of setting culture, of making the right business decisions. I know that as I have been the CEO of many businesses, my focus is it's my job to build culture. My HR department or my HR team, they're a partner in that, but it's my job to set the tone for this business. Ben Horowitz says, company culture is what the employees do when the CEO is not there, which means it's the CEO's responsibility to set that and make decisions that are good for his people, his or her people, and they're good for their culture. And unfortunately, that's been abdicated to a lot of HR departments, and I think that's where a lot of the DEI stuff came from.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. I guess the biggest obstacle that maybe I would be running into is scope and like how often these things happen and are they happening at the level that you might think it's happening. So in the HR example of hiring the 2 black lesbians, with that
Yes.
particularly, if the two black lesbians are qualified to do the job, is this inherently a bad thing? Or and
No.
another thing too is I guess like the scale of how important maybe this is. I'm not sure if I'm as confident as you are that getting rid of this department or that this department is running as much havoc as it seems like it is, or as influential as it seems as it is. So even the examples of the presentations that we're giving at these DEI conferences and stuff, I'm a student here. I've had a ton of campus jobs. It is chock full of DEI training and other things that I have to sit through. But I don't think any of it is really that offensive. And I don't really think any of it is directly putting skin color over merit. It's definitely closer than it should be. I'll grant you that. But
Right.
I don't know. I'm struggling on this like scope a little bit, the seriousness of this, because in all of my experiences and what I can imagine, I just don't know if this is disrupting as much as you might make it seem. But if you could enlighten me on that, I would be very interested in hearing.
Yeah, resumebuilder.com did a survey, and in that survey, 48% of hiring managers were told to preference to that they were not allowed to hire white men anymore. That was they were still trying to hire the best person for the job, but from a significantly constricted pool of candidates, right? You're not allowed to hire white men. And so find the best person that you can among this group of other folks, right? And we talk about the two black lesbians. Well, if you could find two great salespeople who happen to be black lesbians, fantastic. That's great. Now, I will tell you, if someone's headliner of how they describe themselves in a work environment is what they do in their bedroom, that's weird. As a side note, right? Because like, let's say I described to you like, well, I love sleeping with my wife. Like, you'd be like, whoa, like, why is that on your resume? Like, that's super weird. But if you're like, this is what I do sexually, and this is what you should know about me on my work resume, I'd be like, could you talk about how you're good at sales rather than what you do in your bedroom, right? And so I have hired a lot of people who were, homosexuals, and I found out 2 years after I was working for them because their focus was doing the best thing for their job, delivering great value, and not their headliner was not, I am this oppressed category of people and you need to hire me based on those things. And so I think it's more around where the emphasis is. I will tell you, I have lots and lots of stories of people being told, look, you can't get a raise or a promotion at this business unless you become a woman, unless you do a sex change. Or I need to fire you because I am way below quota on black females in this work. And so your quota is fantastic, but I'm sorry, you need to go. In fact, I talked to someone earlier this week, top sales rep, and I even know the company, and I can't share the company, but he was cranking away, and his manager said it was a Friday and just said, sorry, we need to let you go. And as he's walking out, there was a black female walking into his desk. And he's like, man, that just stings, right? When you feel like it does not matter how hard I work, it does not matter how much I produce. It matters only what my skin color is, what my gender is. And so I think it's more demoralizing to people. I would also argue that DEI is a liturgy. It's designed to make you think a certain thing about yourself, about the people around you, and about the world around you, around your coworkers. Because if you see someone who is African American and they just got a promotion, what do you think? Did they get that because they crushed it, or did they get that because of their skin color? Well, that puts that person in a terrible position because now they have to either, live with that, or they have to say, no, I really did a good job. That's why I got this job. In fact, I had a black gentleman working for me. He was a sales rep, and I was promoting him to VP of sales. And he came into my office. He's like, Andrew, I just need to know, am I getting this job because of my skin color or because I'm crushing it? I'm like, because you're crushing it. And I think it would be insulting if I gave you this promotion because of your skin color. He's like, okay, then I will take the promotion. Otherwise, I would not, because I cannot lead a group of people if they all believe or if it's reality that I only got this, not because I'm the best person for the job, but because of who my parents were effectively. And so I just think it's demoralizing for people to discriminate like that. And if you're black and you get a job and everyone's looking at you sideways because they're like, well, did they really earn that? Or was it just, well, that's insulting. It's insulting to them and it's insulting to everyone else around them.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. What I will say though is that it seems like this describes the same situation on the other end too. So there will be some times where I'll be talking to like a woman who has a professional job, and then something will
Yeah.
happen, and she'll say that they treated me this way because I'm a woman, and or she'll
Right.
be like they don't like me because I'm a woman, and I look at that and it's like, no, you're a bad person, and that's why they treated you that way. And but that
Right.
separation is hard. Now the same thing can be true for a lot of the stories that you just gave to me, as
It
in
could
like
be.
you were fired because no, you weren't fired because this black guy is getting hired because of DI. You were fired because you're not very good at your job. Now, I'm not saying that
Correct.
that's a
Correct.
lot of things, but and I know that DEI is a little bit easier to track because there are literal objective quotas that you can look at, that
Right.
describe these things. Um, but I do think you get into dangerous territory when you start to assume why somebody was hired. And I do think that DEI is a problem because it used to only be that like of specific groups of people had to worry about these things, but now everybody has to worry about these things. Am I actually hired because of my
Yes.
abilities or because of my skin color? I don't necessarily though think that DEI is wrong with that, because there are some times when, and I know this word is super cringe, lived experience is kind of important,
Right.
or it plays into a thing. Like if I were on a resume and I were to tell you about this traumatic event that has happened to me that has built up my character and makes me strong and able to do these things,
Yes.
you would see that and be like, that's awesome. Sometimes I can kind of
Right.
circumvent that by just saying, well, I'm gay, and so I had to deal with all of these things, right? And so it's not necessarily overtly talking about your sexuality. It's more so trying to quickly convey to you that I've dealt with whatever issues associated with being gay. Now, you can disagree that there are any issues involved with that. I'd be
Sure.
skeptical of that, but the idea is still there that like there are still maybe valid reasons that you could hire somebody using skin color or background. Now, again, I don't think it should be more than merit, but I do think it
Right.
has its place. And I don't know. I don't know if you necessarily disagree with that, or how you feel about that idea.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're if you're casting a movie, and you want to hire someone, an actor, and if they're
Right.
playing Martin Luther King Jr., you probably should get a black guy to do that, right? But let me give you another example of this, and I agree. There are lots of people who pull the victim card because they think, "Oh, I'm being discriminated against because of my category," whether that's white or black or straight or gay or whatever, right? There's lots of people who are doing that. I was talking to a gentleman, and again, I don't have his permission to share the names, but talking to a gentleman at a very large business on the East Coast. He was in New York City, and his son had just graduated from Princeton, and super sharp kid. Had put out his resume to 100 job offers over 2 months and had gotten zero callbacks, and was like, "Man, what in the world is going on here?" And I said, "Run a little experiment. Just run an experiment. Don't put on pronouns after your name, but just put non-binary biracial, and just put, like it's pronouns with the slash and the parentheses, right? Non-binary biracial. Just put that on there and see what happens." And he got 4 interviews in a week. Now, I think that's actually probably software that's doing that. They're looking for certain things, whether that's an algorithm. And I know that there are famous stories about HR tech companies, ATSs, that are systematically trying to push a DEI agenda. Therefore, they are looking for those type of things when they're surfacing resumes. Because, Starbucks gets at 5 million applicants a year. Of course, they can't have a human being look at 5 million resumes. And so machines have to do that. They have to have an algorithm that's going to sort and bring some to the surface. But the fact that just putting those things in a parentheses on his resume got him interviews, I just think is despicable, personally. Because someone should be based, that had nothing to do with his work history. It had nothing to do with his education, his IQ, his work ethic, any of those things. And so I think that is particularly destructive. But I totally agree with you that there are lots of people who pull the victim card and say, I was discriminated against because I'm a white Christian. No, you're discriminated against because you are a crappy worker and really shouldn't have a job anywhere. So that's absolutely the case. The problem is when you allow that to kind of fester in a workplace where people believe that they can get a job based on their skin color or their sexuality or the gender, then I believe that it plants seeds of doubt in everyone's mind of, am I going to get a raise or a promotion based on hard work? And if not, well, economics is all about motivation, right? What are your incentives? If I know that I will get a raise no matter what my work is because of my skin color, then what are you going to do? Well, you don't have to work hard. And if you believe that I am not going to get a raise or promotion no matter how hard I work because of my skin color, what are you going to do? You're not going to work hard, right? And so that's the destructive nature of it. In the same way that communism has never worked, this type of you get it whether you work hard or not will also not work.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, like really responsible, I guess, of you to accept that, sometimes this happens on the other end. Here's a situation I guess I'll pose
Oh
to
yeah,
you that I'm interested in what you think. There was this story, and again, I'm not going to be able to give you a ton of specifics, so I'm hoping you're just going to be able to grasp the idea that I'm talking about.
yep,
But this company was trying to create a hand dryer, and they created this entire system of this light that senses your hands when it comes under the hand dryer, and then it reflects it, and that's
yeah,
when it decides to turn on. What they had found is they had released this product and installed it in a bunch of bathrooms, and they had found that with darker skin tones, the light couldn't reflect off of the hands in the same way. And this was just like an
yes,
oversight, something that they didn't account for. So
yeah,
imagine that you're the hand dryer company and you get two identical resumes. One person you know is black and one person you know is white. It seems then that there's an incentive to prefer the black people or the black person justifiably if you have a team of all white people, so that they are maybe more likely to catch that kind of mistake given their background. Or let's take out the actual problem and just say that you have two identical resumes, one is black, one is white. Being black theoretically implies that they have overcome certain obstacles that maybe the white person hasn't, which theoretically would create a stronger candidate because just simply because they're black. Now, we can get into the socioeconomic reasons as to why that isn't the case or
right,
is the case, but I guess can you kind of talk
right.
me through like why it wouldn't be the better decision to hire the black person in both of those cases?
Yeah, so in the hair dryer or the hand dryer situation, what's happening there? Where the market is working out a business mistake that they made. They did not think through their demographic, and unless they're only selling their hair dryer or their hand dryer in like North Canada, where the the demographic is like like black people are too smart to live up there. It's too cold,
Yeah.
and right. So like but basically, they made a huge business mistake, and what they're going to do is they're going to reap the marketplace consequences of that mistake. Um, Likely, the people that they sold the hand dryer to are going to want to return it. They're going to say, "Hey, this only works for some of the people using this. It's a faulty product." And that company should eat that, right? And they're gonna reap the reward of not thinking through the diversity of their customers and the diversity of the United States or wherever this is, right? And so they're going to eat that consequence. And it would be idiotic of them to not say, hey, we need to have a black person on our team so that we don't make this kind of market mistake in the future, right? And I think that is a great thing. So like I had a gentleman working for me, and he was a great sales rep. He was based in Oklahoma. And he told me, he's like, and we were picking regions. And he's like, just so you know, I will probably perform better in the South just because I'm going to have a deeper connection with the customers because the demographics are such that there are, more people with the same skin color as me. I would perform better. I'm like, yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. And putting you in Minnesota probably wouldn't make as much sense. And so, did I think that through based on skin color? Yes, but those are market realities. That's not the government or an HR department that has no skin in the game saying you have to hire based on quota, right? And so, yes, there are absolutely instances. I mean, if basketball teams hired based on quotas, well, they're way below on white people often, right? Because honestly, I'm terrible at basketball, and so therefore, like, if you hire me in the NBA as diversity hire, your team's going to lose. Just so you know. And then on the second example that you brought up, okay, so you got two resumes of two people. And I guess my pushback on that would be to assume that the black person has had a harder life in some way, I think is a fallacy. I think there are a lot of people who have a white background and have had a just miserable life. There's a number of black families in our church, and those kids are so well adjusted and awesome and intelligent and articulate. And for me to assume that they've had a worse life than a white counterpart, I think is insulting to them. So I'm going to push back on that one. But I will agree that if someone has overcome a lot, right, and I'll pick on myself. Everyone thought I was retarded until I was 6. I'm wildly dyslexic. I had allergies, all these problems, right? And so I think part of my business success has been my dyslexia. And like I had to figure out how to power through, even though I wasn't good at stuff, right? And that has nothing to do with my skin color. And I think that's the fallacy, is assuming that skin color differentiates those things of have you had a hard life experience or a good life experience. The reality is that skin color should not do that, but you absolutely should hire someone who has overcome incredible challenges because they're probably going to be a better worker. If that happens to be the black person, amazing. If that happens to be the white person, amazing. I would also, the last thing I'm going to say on my pitch for diversity is, in a workplace, you want to have diversity of ideas, and diversity of ideas come from diversity of experience. So if you are only hiring, I'm in North Idaho, if I am only hiring people who have only ever lived in North Idaho, who have never experienced anything outside of our little community, I'm going to have a stunted view of the world, and I'm going to have a stunted view of what our customers actually want. And so sometimes someone who, and my son went over to Africa for 3 months because he wanted to kind of get a different life experience and see the world. And he was the only white guy in his kind of college class that he was taking over there. And he's like, and it was amazing. It was so interesting to see from a different point of view, being the minority. And that was really helpful for him. So you do want diversity of ideas, and you do want diversity of experience. I have people in my business who have been at big businesses and some who have been at small businesses. Well, those are diverse ideas. And so they're going to bring different experience. And I just don't want to do it based on skin color. I want to do it based on actual life experience.
Yeah, and that makes sense too to me. I think though that in the situation of identical, I feel like if you got the entire population of black people, Hispanic people, all different cultures, and you were to just pluck one random person out at proportional levels, I think you would have to agree that if they actually had the same qualifications on their resumes, that you're probably statistically going to pick up somebody who has overcome more in these more disparate groups than maybe the other groups. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily mean that when you look at a black person that they're guaranteed to have overcome that, but at least statistically you can make some sort of judgments just based on that. And it might not be enough to do your decision, but I don't know if throwing the whole thing away is a smart business move, especially when there might also be externalities of diversity, like you were saying, like,
Right.
there are other ways to diversify other than just skin color. But I do think that you might be climbing uphill to try to argue that, at least like the prison populations, the crime populations, the ways that they're built in cities, the way cities differ from rural areas, like all of these factors, I think play into like a statistical significance that a person had to maybe have worked a little bit harder to get, those things on the resume than a white person.
It could be. And the nice part is we live in a free nation with a free market. And so if as a business person you say, look, this is going to be the decision that I want to make is I think that I'm going to try and hire someone with a Hispanic background because I believe that they're going to have a better work ethic than somebody else because they've had to, fight through more. Fantastic. Make that decision. I think where my stress comes is when the government or when an external body who has no skin in the game is saying you have to make decisions based on skin color rather than merit. And I'm also going to encourage you, be careful, right? If we just assume that people with black skin are going to come from a harder background with more crime or whatever, like we just need to be careful there because that's not universally the case. And anytime you put someone in a category And I'm gonna, punch back here a little bit. That's Marxism at the end of the day. It's saying everybody is oppressed or oppressor. Everybody's proletariat or bourgeoisie, right? And I don't think that is a fair assessment. I think what made America great is that you had a bunch of immigrants from all over the world come here, and they had to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and they had the freedom to be able to do that based on their own hard work and merit. And if we can get back to that in America and focus less on some of these external things, then we'll have a very diverse workplace. We'll have a place where everyone can succeed and is given the opportunity to succeed. I think it is absolutely evil if a business is given that opportunity. And let's say they have a resume of a black person and they're a 9, and a resume of a white person and that person's a 7 or an 8, and they pick the white person because, well, I just feel more comfortable with that person. I think it's evil, but I think it's evil the other way as well.
Yeah, and I don't even disagree with you, and I agree that maybe a governmental entity and maybe even societally to force that as a standard, like I don't necessarily
Yes.
like. I guess my argument is more so that it is an effective business decision to make those things, but it should be up to you
Yes.
as a business person to make those things. And I don't think society punishing you for not making those decisions is fair. I think that that's
I
wrong.
think that's
And
right.
same thing. I do think HR has skin in the game. Hopefully, truthfully, I'm not super into the business world. I'm 22. I'm about to graduate. I'm about to start, right? But so,
Right.
I'm not going to act like I know how HR works, but HR theoretically has skin in the game as in they want to make the company money. But regardless of that, I understand like on a societal level, it's unfair and you should allow businesses to make bad decisions or good decisions. You shouldn't
That's
mandate
right.
it based
And
on
let them
some
eat their own
culture
cooking.
thing.
100%.
Yeah, yep, exactly. And so I think we're in agreement on that. I do want to talk a little bit about I guess whining. And you say like you don't want to hire like a whiner.
Yeah,
To
100%.
me, it seems like a whiner can also be a whiner obviously on the other end. So if someone comes in and they're like, "Hey, I'm sorry, we don't pray here. Like that's just not something that we do."
Yeah.
And then you have a problem with that. Does that also make you a whiner, right?
Well, I think disagreeing and whining are very different things,
Right,
right?
right.
And I'll give an example of this. So at every business that I've run, one of my core principles is no gossip. No gossip. No talking behind each other's backs. And what that means is if you have a problem with someone, you go and talk to them straight up, like an adult. And that's not whining. That's saying, hey, what you're doing right now is super annoying. Like, hey, you play trumpet every day at noon while I'm trying to be on sales calls. And so like that's a non-starter here at the office, right? That's not whining, that's having a conversation. It's when you fill out anonymous surveys or when you're unwilling to go and talk to that person and instead go to HR and complain about that person. Well, you're now talking behind their back rather than just dealing with it straight up. So I would tell new employees that came to my businesses, look, if you come in my office and say, Andrew, I think you as the CEO are totally screwing the pooch. You are doing a terrible job, and here's why. I might give you a raise because you had the guts to come and talk to me. And I know that as a CEO, I have a lot of blind spots. And if I think that I have it all so put together that I don't need input from younger people in my organization or older people in my organization, then I'm just an arrogant CEO and the market's going to penalize me for that. And I'm going to fail as a business. Whereas if someone comes in my office and says, so and so over there, they're just not doing a good job. And I'll be like, oh, have you talked to them yet? Oh, you haven't? Okay, hold on a second. And I'd leave my office and I'd go grab that person they were just talking about. And I'd bring him into my office. One of the three of us have a discussion. So and so here thought that you were, not doing a very good job. And honestly, there's two sides to every story. So maybe let's talk about that right now. Well, I will tell you right now, that is a super awkward conversation. And I love awkward conversations. So that's maybe my superpower if I was an Avenger. Awkward conversations. I don't know if you can kill bad guys with awkward conversations, but so like that's a super awkward conversation. But what it does is it creates a safe work environment where people know that if someone has a problem with me, they have to come and talk to me, and they aren't allowed to go and talk behind my back and fill out an anonymous survey or go to HR and complain about me or go to their boss and complain about me. That's simply not okay. And so what happens, it's innovation starts to happen because you're allowed to say something stupid because they say every great idea comes from 9 bad ideas. And so you can say one of those bad ideas and you know that's a safe work environment. People are going to be like, that's a bad idea. Rather than people going, oh, interesting. And then all talking afterwards, like, oh, that guy's such an idiot. Like, can you imagine he said that, right? And so that's how innovation happens. It creates a safe work environment. And so that's the difference in my mind between whining and having a discussion. I tell people you should not be talking to anybody about a problem unless they're part of the problem or they're part of the solution, right? If you have a problem with your coworker, they're part of the problem, go and talk to them. If you need advice on how to talk to them, you might go to your manager and say, "Hey, I'm bringing up this other person not because I'm, trying to whine about them. I'm bringing them up because I want to know what's the best way for me to deal with this. I need advice from you as a wiser person who is my manager, right? So that person's now part of the solution. So if someone's not part of the problem or part of the solution, you shouldn't be having a conversation. Going to the water cooler and being like, Rob's such a moron. Can you imagine like being that dumb and still having a heartbeat, right? Well, that's actually not part of the problem or part of the solution. That's just gossip. And so I think that's really my distinction is I don't want whiners. I do want people who say, Andrew, you're doing a terrible job. Well, that's not whining. That's giving me input and that's helping point out my blind spot.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. I should have asked this at the beginning, and my apologies. When are you, when would you like to stop recording? Like when do you have a deadline?
I'm good.
Okay,
I'm fine.
cool. Because I'm really enjoying this conversation, so
and I came late, so
No, you're totally good.
You penalize me on the back
Right.
end.
Okay, and that's really interesting too. I think that one of the chief concerns is that when you look into the past, people are looking at people were overworked, they were unhappy, they were uncomfortable sharing their feelings, their inconveniences. They kind of bottled that up, and then it led to a lot of maybe higher drug addictions, higher suicidality, just a lot of externalities that maybe we don't like. And a lot of people pin this on overworking, too hard of an adherence to your job, to corporate America, overworking yourselves. And so you kind of have a lot of concerns with the new psychology movement, with mental health and stuff like that. Even requiring that people come and say their feedback directly is probably a really uncomfortable experience. Now, I'm not saying uncomfortable experiences are bad, but can you kind of speak to, the people who are hearing this and they're like, this guy's insane. I don't know why anybody should care this much about work. I don't know why people should work this hard. Like, how do you kind of combat the people who are worried about mental health, living life outside of work? Like, how do you kind of deal with overcommitment?
Yeah, no, and it's a legitimate concern, and I would say there's a Gallup poll out that I think it was last year, but it said that 67% of workers in America are either disengaged or actively disengaged in their job today. So they do not enjoy it. There's a reason that it's TGIF. Thank goodness it's Friday. Finally, I'm done with the workday, and in fact, the whole mindset around I want to work until I can earn enough money to retire because I hate work. Is I think a result of when you don't have a happy work environment, when you are constantly playing politics, when you are nervous, or is someone talking behind my back? Do I have to worry that someone's getting offended right now? Am I going to get written up by HR? You can't be yourself. You can't live your values out loud, right? And so I think that those are more contributing factors. When you have a job where you are valued based on the if you read Patrick Lencioni's work, he talks about if you have autonomy and mastery at work, you're going to be happy at your job no matter how many hours you work. And so I don't think that, my opinion, but it is backed up by some gurus in the space. Burnout is not necessarily based on number of hours. It's based on who you work with, who your manager is, and what the work environment is. Is it a toxic work environment, or is it a work environment where you're like, hey, we're trying to solve a problem together? I will tell you, people work at Red Balloon, and we're a small business, right? We're 3 years old, so we have 35 employees here. I have to encourage people like, okay, 6:00, go home, have dinner with your families. We've all crushed it today, but it's time to go. And part of the reason I have to do that is because we have a shared vision of what we're trying to solve. We're trying to solve something really important. And you think about, like, I used to play baseball, and I'm not that good at baseball anymore. But when I played baseball in high school, I could have the coach hit me ground balls for like 5 hours in a row, and I never got tired of it just because I deeply love baseball. Or I could go to the batting cage for just hours on end. So when you're having fun, when you feel like I'm doing a thing that is making me a better person, that is part of my life goal, that is meaningful for my family, whatever it is, that's what is going to give you joy at work. It's not necessarily number of hours or your inability to share your emotions at work. I think there should be a world in which you can say to your manager, "Hey, I am really struggling with being sad at work. What's going on here?" Right? And a wise manager is going to be like, "Okay, I think you probably need to take a little time off. You need to go spend some time with your family. You need to, decompress somewhere, etc." I think that there's a good place for that, and unfortunately, we kind of lost that in America, where businesses don't care about their employees in the same way that they used to. And I think that's a huge business mistake because we're in a knowledge-based economy. And if you actually deeply care for your people, and I, as a Christian, realize that everybody who's working for me, they're an everlasting soul. And I want them to be a better person after they work for me. So at Red Balloon and at every business I've ever run, I have 3 principles that I drive the business for. Bless the customer. I want every customer to be better off because they interacted with us, whether they buy anything or not. I want them to be able to wake up on Monday morning and be like, I can do my job better because I interacted with the employees at fill in the blank, the company that I'm running. The next one is bless the employee. I want every employee to be a better person because they work for me. And not just a better person while they're here, but a better employee for the next employer. I want them to have more stable families. I want them to have a better social life. And I want them to get the self-satisfaction that comes from hard work that you can only accomplish when you take on something hard and accomplish it. You think about it in sports. If you're an NBA team and you play a high school team and you win, it's not deeply satisfying. Like, you actually kind of feel like a jerk, right? But if you are playing in a championship game and you beat the next best team, that is deeply satisfying. Well, why is that? Well, God built us as human beings. If we accomplish a hard thing together with other people, that is deeply satisfying. That's the most satisfying, almost one of the most satisfying things you can have. And so you need to have hard work that you're doing together. So bless the customer, bless the employee, and then bless the shareholder. The shareholders are last, and they should be last, but they're still on the list because we're under authority. We understand that shareholders are above us and authority is not a bad thing, but we need to put customers and employees first. The reason that I came up with these many years ago is because I was at a Fortune 500 company, and their company mission on the elevator door, and it said, maximize returns for shareholders. And I'm like, that is the most soul-sucking mission I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, if making money is the sole end of business, someday you're going to die and you're not going to take any of it with you. So what? And so my mission and my vision has always been, I want to bless customers. I want them to be better off. I want employees to be better off. And then I want shareholders to be better off because I understand authority. And 50 years from now, I'm probably going to be dead. And the work that I've done to build employees up so that they can support their families and live a better life is way more important than the dollars that I earn. There you go.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's what you were asking.
No, I mean, and it's it's really refreshing to hear stuff like that. I mean, you see the movies, like where you have this horrible office environment and your boss is doing all these things, and so it's really motivational.
Joe versus the volcano, or whatever.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think of the other one. It's not Clerks. It's But anyway, I won't be able to get my movie
Office
knowledge.
Space. I mean,
Office Space. There you go.
variety.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I was thinking of Office Space. But
Yeah.
but the idea though, all of this sounds really good and great in theory, and these should be the guiding principles that you have as a CEO, as a boss, as a manager. However, the problem is when two things conflict, that's when the problem solving happens. And so the idea of having perfect autonomy to exist as you are, say what you want, and not worry about offending people, that's kind of a double-edged sword in that, like, what if somebody came up to you and they're like, hey, I really hate working at my job because I'm surrounded by 9 Christians and I'm an atheist and they're all kind of ganging up on me because of my beliefs, or I don't feel comfortable with everybody praying around me, even though they're not saying anything, they're kind of judging me. And you can insert any other, political thing. But when people are uncomfortable because of the way that other people are expressing themselves, how do you kind of reconcile, yes, you can be who you are, but this is too disruptive or this is not? Like, how do you kind of reconcile those differences?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I had an LDS, a Mormon, working for me at one point. Super sharp guy, and he was basically trying to witness to everybody in a 5 foot radius of him constantly. And I'm like, all right, dude. His name will remain anonymous, but like, dude. So like, I'm gonna fire you if you keep this up because we're here to do a job. We're not here. It's not that this is religion first and then a job. I understand sphere sovereignty. When I'm with my family, that's my world. When I'm at my church, that's my world. When I'm at work, I'm still a whole person, right? And the fact that I have kids and that I'm married to a wonderful woman and that I go to church on Sunday and I believe that Jesus, died to save us from our sins, that should have an impact. I'm a whole person. But if I spend all my time at work trying to push my worldview on everyone around me in the same way that I believe the left has been trying to do for the last, call it 4 years. I don't think that is respecting other people. And it's not winsome. It's not actually, it's very authoritarian, especially as the CEO, right? If I'm like, hey, this is what we're doing. Now, here's what I do. When I interview someone, and I've done this for 20 years now, I try and be the final interview for anyone who works for me. And when they come in, I say, hey, I just need you to know what you're getting into. I am an unapologetic conservative Christian in the way that I run this business. And that means that we have a kegerator in the office. We have a super fun time, but don't get drunk. It means that we're not going to gossip behind each other's back. It means that I have zero tolerance for sexual harassment. It means I do not allow pornography on any of the computers in the office, right? I'm like, here are the ramifications of how I see the world and how I'm going to run this business. If you are uncomfortable with this, you shouldn't take this job. If you're cool with this, you are welcome because it's not a prerequisite. It's not a weird thing. You don't even have to agree with me. You can think I'm crazy. I don't care. But I need you to know what you're coming into because I'm the CEO. Therefore, I'm going to set the culture in a lot of ways. I probably did 1,000 interviews or more where I ended the interview with that. 3 people said, you know what? I'm not comfortable with that. That's a little bit weird for me. I'm like, okay, no problem. You're still very welcome, but I just needed to know what you're getting into. And they're like, I actually appreciate you being as upfront as you are about that. And so I'm, going to go find another opportunity. Fantastic. And ended up hiring people from wildly different worldviews, but they knew what they were coming into. And that's my prerogative as a CEO. And if you have a CEO who's an atheist and they're like, hey, this is what I believe. This is how I'm going to run the company. And you're like, yep, I'm not comfortable with that. Well, it's a free market. Knock yourself out. Do what you want. But I think it gets back to the freedom to be able to live that out. Now, if you have an employee and they are being badgered by employees of different worldviews, whether that's religion, political, or whatever, if they just voted for Kamala Harris and their coworker has a Trump trumpet and they're like, "Burr, burr, burr, I won again," right? Well, that's actually just the Trump guy is a super annoying employee and they should probably be fired because they're disruptive in the workplace. Because the point is we're driving value for our customers at the end of the day. And that's part of the reason bless the customer has to be first. And if you keep that front and center, if you spend your time at work trying to witness or proselytize all the people around you, that's not blessing the customer, is it? Well, then you shouldn't do it, right? And if you use that rubric of bless the customer, bless the employee, bless the shareholder in that order, a lot of these things work out really nicely.
Yeah, and all of this seems super reasonable to me, which is, I guess, nice.
I'm a very reasonable person.
Not that I expected anything less, but it's just
right,
important.
Sure.
Whenever somebody comes out as obviously like one-sided, it's very nice to see them kind of restrict their views. Now, I do want to ask one more hedging question before we kind of conclude everything.
Yeah, sure.
But when it comes to, I guess like political leanings, to me, I don't know. It seems like a really small percentage of left-leaning people are actually as extreme as you might describe. In that, like, I feel like the internet has created a world in which we see the very loud group of people, but I don't know if you sampled all of the Democrats, how many people would actually agree with extreme DEI measures, or they would agree with,
right.
Maybe a lot of the things that we alluded to. They might agree to smaller amounts or reasonable amounts. And the same is true for the far right as well. And so that, like,
I agree.
There's a very loud group of people on the far right and there are all types of words that get used to describe these things. And I guess I just want to get your thoughts on, like, you know, I guess, how do you feel about the fact that, to me, it feels like a large majority of left-leaning people would be able to comfortably work under you. They would be very reasonable. Their beliefs on these things would be probably pretty reasonable. You don't have to agree with that, but I guess, like, if you could speak to the left-leaning audience that is listening to you right now
Yeah.
and has maybe perceived you as reasonable, how do you perceive the left right now? Like, what are your final messages to the people who have made it this far, in terms of, their political beliefs?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say you're 100% spot on. I think it's the 5% on the two ends that generally are the most active on X or Facebook or whatever. Those are the people that are pushing their worldview, and trying to make everyone believe that everyone else is in a category, and so on and so forth. Yes, I have had lots of people who, again, culturally I wildly disagree with, who worked with me, and we had no friction, we had no tension, because the goal was to bless the customer, bless the employee, and bless the shareholder. And I truly meant that all the way down, and so it put us in an interesting spot. I will say that 2016 was a funny year. When the last election came around, it was the first time that I'd ever seen politics get into the workplace in that way. And as a tech CEO, right, I'm in Idaho, but I knew a lot of people in San Francisco and Seattle and Portland. The tech world, I would put a lot of them in that 5% on the far left, unfortunately. I had CEOs of tech businesses emailing me. They were emailing their customer email list. They were a software company, saying, "You must vote for Joe Biden. This is the most important election in the history of America." And I thought, in what world? Like, I would never even imagine doing that with my company email list.
This is
right?
2016 or 2020?
2016.
Okay, right.
Right.
Yeah.
They believed that Trump was an existential threat to the world, and they believed that Joe Biden, you must vote for Joe Biden. Wait a minute, am I getting? Oh, you're right.
Hillary
2020.
Clinton.
Sorry.
Okay, no, that's totally okay.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Right.
2020. Yes, 2020. Right. The end of the first of Trump, 45. I had these emails, and I had an employee who worked for me who accidentally tweeted, back when tweeting was a thing. Now it's Xing. I don't even know what that. Anyway, it's always tweeting to me. But I had an employee that accidentally tweeted something about Joe Biden in 2020, and or in 2019, leading up to the election, from the company account rather than his own account. And I got a call from the board, and they said, that person needs to be fired by morning. And I said, if they had said something bad about Donald Trump, the sitting president at the time, would I need to fire him? They're like, absolutely not. Without apology. Just like, no, that's just the way it is. Like, oh, that seems bad. And this was kind of the beginning of that board kind of going sideways on me and kicking me out of the business. So I definitely think that there are a small group of people that are extreme on both sides. I think on average, and of course, this is where I'm coming from, so you might think I'm crazy. On average, people on the far right are more tolerant of different worldviews than people on the left. If you're left-leaning, you probably totally disagree with that statement. But I will happily go out and have a beer with someone who's a Kamala Harris t-shirt wearing person, and I'll have a conversation with him. I'm not going to be stressed out. Like, look, you can have your worldview. I have my worldview. Everything's fine. But I will say it's the left who forced everyone to wear a mask. It's the left that made everybody take a vaccine. I don't know if conservatives have ever had that kind of broad sweeping mandate that they push down on anyone. And maybe I'm wrong. Give me an example of where a right-leaning administration said, everyone has to do this. I don't care.
Yeah, I can't think of. There are other things that I can think of that might be.
I know. I'm
worse
just saying,
than that.
who is more
but
authoritarian,
right.
the left or the right? Well, that as one example. I've never seen the right do that in the same way the left has.
Look, I would stray away from maybe the word authoritarian, but
I'm going to get you in trouble now.
Well, we can't, we don't have enough time to unpack, that whole thing.
I know, right?
But in
now
terms,
the show's over.
In terms of mandates, I could probably agree with you. There are other authoritative, nature things that we would probably disagree on that might exist. But in terms of mandates, fingers on every single person, I do agree. I can't think of much that does the same thing as that. But we're running a little bit past an hour here, which is totally awesome. It was a really great conversation. I wanted to give you just the platform to kind of round us out. Please do every and all advertising that you would like to get people to, your medias, your channels, your websites, everything like that. And then I would encourage you to maybe summarize, your broad point, your broad vibe, anything that you would like the viewers who have made it this far to get out of your episode. It's really yours to kind of round us out.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so go to redballoon.work. And it's .work because .com sounds too much like communism, and we want hard work, not communism. I want people to show up. Work is redeeming for the soul. It's good for you. And so that's why we call it redballoon.work. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, and I'm sure I'm on Instagram. Well, my social media manager tells me I'm on Instagram and these other things, but I'm on LinkedIn. So I try and put out a meaningful post every single day about how to be a better employee, how to be a better employer, how to think about hiring and running your business. I do dabble in politics a little bit, so be careful. It might be spicy on occasion, but the reality is you will be entertained, I guarantee, if you go and follow me on LinkedIn. And there are not a lot of Andrew Crapuchettes out there, so if you look for me, you're going to find me. So I'd encourage people to do that. And I guess redballoon.work, there's a ton of free resources there. There's an employee bill of rights and responsibilities. So if you want to understand what your rights are in the workplace, whether you are right-leaning or left-leaning, you at least need to know what your rights are and what your responsibilities are, because the founding fathers understood those two things went together, rights and responsibilities. I'd encourage you to go check out all those free resources on redballoon.work. And the last thing I would just encourage everyone to do is the only way that you can innovate, the only way you can come closer to truth is debate things that make you feel uncomfortable. And so don't be afraid to talk about stuff. Live your values out loud, and don't shout people down because they disagree with you. And I think if we can get back to that in America, we're going to be in a position where we can actually interact with people in a very healthy way. My last thing is, it's so easy to complain about all the ills that are happening in the world. Don't complain about them. Go do something about it. Get off your couch, finish listening to this podcast, and then go do something to bless somebody else. And if you do that, you won't get burned out at work because you're actually dying to self and living for other people. And when you do that, it is deeply and richly rewarding. So go do stuff, talk about things that are awkward, and have a great life.
Wow. Thank you so much, Andrew, for coming on the show.